IVC. Recently got back from a week's holiday up in Northumberland, part of the country I've never been to before, and is beautiful. Can thoroughly recommend it. Came back from there with a handful of records, which I won't show today. I need to listen to them a bit more before I talk about them. But as well as that, I came back with COVID, so that's why I've not posted for a while. But I tried recording a video yesterday and it just wasn't happening. Hopefully I can get through this today. But I'm on the mend. And certainly didn't have it as bad as some people get it. But yeah, can't recommend it either. But I do have some records here that I can recommend. Nice link, huh? So yeah, this is just some recent vinyl finds predating the trip up to Northumberland, but ones I've been meaning to talk about and haven't quite got round to yet. So we'll start off with Donna Garrett's Homegrown album from 1973. This is one I've had my eye on for a little while. I actually bought a copy on eBay which never turned up, so I was pretty annoyed about that. An unreputable dealer, I think. But managed to pick this one up nice and cheap, which when you see it, it tends to be. It's a bit of an unknown quantity, I think, but it's got a lot going for it. It's on the Elektra label, Elektra Butterfly label. And what's it like? Well, it's I'd say it's superior Beatlesque pop. There's some strings and horns on here, but they're not overused. Very tastefully done. The whole thing is pretty McCartney-esque, which is right up my alley. Particularly, there's a piano ballad on here called Heather Ann, which is a dark and moody piano ballad and very McCartney-esque. Elsewhere, what have we got? Last track on side one, Man Woman. That's the only sort of misstep on here for me. It's a bit of sort of musical nonsense with banjo and clarinet, but you know, it's brief and it's the end of the side, so easy to skip if you want to, but yeah, it's not terrible. It's just a bit pointless, really. Side 2 starts off well with the Hollywood song, which I suppose is very Badfinger-esque, with a bit of Brian Prothero in there and Emmett Rhodes, a bit of Harry Nilsson perhaps. So, you know, you're getting a feel for what this is about. The sleeve doesn't really give much away. You wouldn't know what kind of an album this is from that sleeve, I don't think. You get a little more of a sense from the back there. But it's a great album. Finishes with a track called 2-Bit Afternoon, which has kind of shades of Lucy in the Sky with diamonds in its vocal phrasing. And it's also got an added brass band and a barking dog. And so, yeah, definitely a Beatlesque album, leaning more towards the McCartney side of things and, like I say, Nilsson and Emmett Rhodes. So if that's your bag, and it's definitely mine, check it out because it can be had cheaply and seems to go under the radar at the moment. So that's Donna Garrett. Great stuff. And next up, got an album which was a bit of a blind buy. I got it from Shaq's Stacks of Wax in Kingston, which is a great shop if you're in Surrey, sort of southwest London area. I can recommend it. And this was a band that the name rang a bell, but I couldn't think why, and I just thought I'd take a punt on it. It's Flood. And those guys look so happy to see you, don't they? I think I'm going to get my head kicked in. Kind of a bit of an aggressive rural vibe there. Perhaps they'll tap me with pitchforks, I'm not sure. But yeah, this is a really interesting album. It features a guy called Greg Godovitz, who later went on to form a band called Goddo. And I've got a couple of their albums, and they're not bad, but prefer this. They're Canadian. Did I say that already? Can't remember. This came out in 1971, and it's commercial, rural flavoured rock with super strong vocal harmonies and some really great incisive guitar playing. And as well as that, great songwriting. I've really been enjoying this album. Some of the highlights: A Man Like You, which is all sort of acoustic picking and again layered harmony vocals. First track on the B-side, Birmingham, which is again very Beatlesque, with sort of feel of The Move in there as well, and again Badfinger. Mama's Boy is very Dylan-esque, which is a slight departure, but you know it all hangs together as an album. You know, they've got all these influences within their palette, if you like. You See Me is, again, it hammers home that rural rock thing, very reminiscent of The Band or Creedence Clearwater Revival. And the final track, Tuesday Blue, it's the heaviest thing on here, and it's sort of it begins with crashing Pete Townsend like sort of chords, and is a real slice of Who influenced Powerpop, but with Bird style vocal harmonies. Even the drummer gets in on the act and is very Keith Moon style on that particular track. So yeah, this one, if you see it, don't sleep on it. Really, really good album. Like I say, rural rock with definite kind of Beatles influence and spectacular harmonies. Great guitar playing. There you go, Flood. And here's one I've been after for a while. Quite a fan of this band. It's Nectar. This came out, I think they'd released 4 studio albums before this, and they were very much in that kind of Psych tinge, spacey kind of prog rock vibe. And yeah, there's some tracks on here that I don't think appear on the studio albums. Could be wrong about that, but I didn't recognise them. So they're quite jammy on this live album, in case you can't read that. So yeah, they're quite jammy and tripped out. You know, it's like the first side, there's one song that's nearly 10 minutes long, another that's 11.5 minutes long. So you get a feel for what you're getting. But there's a lot of great guitar and Hammond interplay on here. And they were basically a British band working in Germany, led by a guy called Royal Brighton on lead vocals and guitar. Sadly, he died about 2016, I think. But a really good band. They always get kind of described as krautrock just because they happen to work out of Germany, but they were British. They don't sound like krautrock particularly, but a really good spacey prog rock band. Like I said, long songs, a jammy feel to a lot of it, but tight as all hell. And then the final 2 tracks on side 2, they are shorter, pared back, and have a sort of floaty, ethereal feel to them. So slightly different vibe to the rest of the album, but I can recommend pretty much anything by Nectar. Great band. They always have fantastic cover art. This, I think, is no exception. It's a little bit different to their other stuff, but you know, interesting, kind of using the vintage print of a theatre with their live show superimposed on it. But definitely worth giving a spin. Then I'm slowly building up my collection of Can albums. And I picked up Landed not so long ago. This came out in 1975. I think it's fair to say they were past their peak at this point. Damo Suzuki is gone, so the remaining members take on vocal duties. And that's okay, they do a decent job. Rhythmically, this is as unconventional as ever. For the most part, it sounds like they're playing a bunch of plastic drain pipes and Tupperware instead of a drum kit. So, you know, they're always interesting. But this does have the feel of an album where a little short on ideas. It's definitely not as focused as previous efforts. You don't quite get that hypnotic, motoric, trance-like feel to the tracks. But I could imagine this being a big influence on Talking Heads and perhaps dance acts like Yellow hearing this and perhaps taking ideas from it. There's one track, Vernal Equinox, which has a great guitar solo on it, and the album's worth getting for that alone. But there's a track called Unfinished, which they couldn't even be bothered to think up a proper title for it, let alone to finish the song. So that's not one that I would recommend if you have a migraine, because it's just a collage of ambient noise and probably one to skip, to be honest. Sounds like the soundtrack to a sci-fi movie, which in that context it would work, but as a listening experience it's a bit harsh. So it's a decent LP, but not essential. Glad to have it in the collection, but certainly not where you would want to start if you're deciding to get into Can. And then this is another one, thinking about it, this was also one of the records I'd bought off a dealer when I bought that, or originally thought I'd bought that Donna album. This was another one that I bundled in with my purchases from that dealer, and they didn't deliver, so I've had to buy it separately. I wonder if I got them for too cheap a price because it was on eBay, and I think sometimes unscrupulous dealers just decide to not bother sending stuff if they think they didn't get enough money for it. So anyway, I've picked this up cheaply elsewhere. I got it for one track which I'd heard, which I loved, but as it happens, the whole album's really good. That's Joey Wilson's Going Up album. It came out in 1980, and it's very much sort of power pop new wave album. Interestingly, it's produced by Jimmy Destry, keyboard player from Blondie. People who rave about this album, and you will find them online raving about it, they have nothing bad to say about it. They think it's a unheralded classic, and it's certainly very good, and it is really growing on me. The track that drew me in was the track Underground, which is quite unrepresentative of the whole album, really. It's a smoky late night orchestrated piano ballad. It's all minor chords and tugged heartstrings and a killer saxophone solo. And like I say, very unrepresentative of the album. The rest of the album is pure new wave power pop. It reminds of sort of early Joe Jackson and Squeeze. And the whole thing's growing on me. I came for that one track, and I've stuck around for the rest of it. It's a really good album. Since getting it, I've found out a few sad bits of background news. Joey Wilson had some addiction problems, and he died of a heroin overdose on Christmas Day 1997 when he was just 43 years old. So I think this is the total of his recorded output, but I could be wrong. 1997, from 1980 to 1997, that's quite a few years to produce some more music, so perhaps I'm missing something. But yeah, if you're into a bit of new wave power pop, that could be up your alley. And here's one I've been meaning to show for a while. In fact, no, I don't think I have. Could be wrong. But yeah, I was wanting to get a bit more of a handle on it before I talked about it. And again, I've really been enjoying it. It's Gringo's one and only album. Came out in 1971, self-titled. First thing to say is just how beautiful that Art Deco sleeve art is. Really quite striking. And there's the band. They're originally known as Toast. I think they released one 7-inch single in 1970. They're from Dorset in the UK, and they feature John Perry on bass, who I think I talked about him not so long ago. He was a member of Aviator, a slightly later British prog band. So this is what he was doing before that. This is a slightly folky take on prog rock, with a definite sort of hangover of West Coast kind of psychedelia and a bit of psych pop as well. But it's prog, but you can just hear that kind of bubbling away in the background. There are simple, not overly long songs on here, so it's not that kind of extended suites that you sometimes get with 70s prog. There's plenty of eccentric, quirky time changes, a ton of electric piano and the occasional organ, some unshowy guitar, and some great bass playing from John Perry. And his bass playing really drives the songs along. Influences or similarities, I'd say a touch of Jefferson Airplane, but don't take too much notice of that because I'm probably hearing something that's not there. But I'm just getting that West Coast vibe. But definitely a Canterbury prog feel, a bit of Procol Harum, Curved Air, a bit of Mamas and Papas because the vocal harmonies on here are spectacular. And there's a woman called Casey Singe, I think her name is. She's credited with vocals on here, but she doesn't take all the lead vocals. But when she provides backing vocals, she just adds some extra depth to those harmonies and a sort of ethereal, folky quality to her lead vocals. Absolutely fantastic. I really like this album. And Casey was later part of a vocal trio called Thunder Thighs, who some of you may know because they are the group who provided the backing vocals for Lou Reed's Walk on the Wild Side. So, you know, her talent was obviously recognised beyond this band. Difficult to pick out highlights on this album because I love it all, but there's a track called Moonstone on the second side, which has a bass and electric piano intro and a real jazzy vibe. And again, those beautiful harmony vocals, and that just really, really does it for me. So for me, this is like an 8 out of 10 album. This is a US pressing because the UK one, I don't think I've ever actually seen a copy in the wild, but I saw this at a reasonable price on the Decca label and I snapped it up, and it's a good sounding pressing. Gringo. Now, Manfred Mann for me is one of those artists who it doesn't matter whether you're talking about his 60s British invasion style pop, Manfred Mann's Chapter 3, where he got a bit kind of jazzy and dark and progressive, or the Earth Band, who were just prog rock, the zenith. So when I finally found a copy of this at a decent price, and it was a decent price, I think, because as you can see, there's a bit of sleeve wear in places here and there, and a bit of staining. But the actual disc is absolutely pristine. And it's a nice original mono pressing on the Fontana label, as you can see. And I'm not normally somebody who seeks out mono pressings. I've started to appreciate that they can sound quite different and sometimes superior to the stereo. And this particular album sounds amazing in mono. Maybe it does in stereo as well, but it seems like the mono pressing gives it a sort of an airy spaciousness to the sound, which kind of reinforces the psychedelic elements of some of these songs. You know, it's psych pop when it's psych. It's not full on hard psych or anything, but just the mono pressing and the production just give it such an airy depth. I'm loving listening to this. So it's basically an area. Sorry. My mind is kind of wandering. I'm still not quite fully with it after getting through COVID, so bear with me. But it's an LP of superior British invasion vocal pop with tons of period charm. It's rich, it's lush, fat bottom end. There's harpsichord on here, there's moody sax and strings at times. And being a soundtrack, there are kind of reprises of the title track, Up the Junction. And each time it's handled in a very different way. So you don't feel shortchanged that you get in the same track. Sometimes it's almost unrecognisable as the same track. The third time it comes in, it's a sort of woozy, psych-tinged version of the title track with a sort of a New Orleans jazz band outro. Really interesting stuff. Side 2 starts with a track called Just For Me. And that's organ-fueled, dreamy Baroque pop. Elsewhere you get a bit of sort of almost bachelor pad jazz. And then the track Wailing Horn. It's just that, it's a wailing horn. It's just eerie and atmospheric and quite unexpected. But I don't recall ever having seen this film, but I'd be interested to check it out. I only really know Dennis Wortman from his days in Minder. But if a soundtrack's anything to go by, it'd definitely be worth checking out. I've been thinking of doing a video on some of my favourite soundtracks. And I'll probably put that together at some point, but I think this will probably feature fairly high. Really, really good. I'm so pleased to have it. I mean, yes, to have a copy without that damage on the sleeve would be great, but to be honest, it doesn't bother me that much. It still looks pretty good, and it sounds amazing. And finally, self-titled album by Valhalla, which originally came out in 1969. But this is a 2013 reissue on the O Music label. And this is proto-prog, psych / hard rock. It's Hammond heavy with lots of soaring, fuzzed up guitar from, what's his name, Don Krantz. And the vocals remind me very much of Jack Bruce at times. And in fact, there's one track on here, which one is it? I'm Not Asking, where it sounds very much like Cream, if Cream was slathered in Hammond organ. It's really good stuff. So yeah, the influences or similarities are probably Cream, Vanilla Fudge, Procol Harum, early Deep Purple, that kind of thing. A bit of muddy production on this. Whether that's just this pressing or the originals were like that, I'm not sure, but it does have that kind of muddiness to the sound, which almost gives it kind of a period flavour, I suppose, for that kind of proto-prog kind of thing. So the highlights are many, to be honest, but that track I'm Not Asking is one of them. Good, hard psych track. Elsewhere, the track Deacon is slightly odd slice of orchestrated Baroque pop with a sort of Hollywood Western soundtrack vibe, almost like High Chaparral kind of crossed with Baroque pop, which sounds like a horrible description, but somehow or other it slots in quite nicely in the album. It doesn't really rankle too much. What else we got? Heads Are Free, which starts side 2, has sort of a jazzy Doors swing to it, which is always welcome. And JBT is a mellow sort of organ psych piece with a vocal, which would really slot in quite nicely to the legendary Gandalf album, which came out slightly earlier the same year, I think. So if you're into that Gandalf album, you might get some mileage out of this. There's a touch of Procol Harum on the track Conversation, which relies more on piano than Hammond organ on that particular occasion. And definitely that gives it a bit of a Procol Harum vibe, particularly as the vocal sounds quite Gary Brooker-esque on there. So I can recommend this. really decent album. And the keyboard player, Mark Mangold, he stuck around and forged a career in the music industry, which went on for many years, possibly still going. I'm not sure about that, but he was in bands who became progressively more mainstream, more AOR, I suppose. American Tears was one of them. Touch, who famously one of the bands who played at the first ever Monsters of Rock festival at Castle Donington, and I think they were best remembered, apart from being bottom of the bill, they're best remembered because one of the band members swallowed a bee on stage, and that caused a bit of drama apparently. Don't think it's part of the stage act, but you never know. And Mark Mangold was also in Drive, she said, and was in the Sign with Terry Brock, and had one of their albums. Not sure if they did more than one, but that's a really powerful slice of melodic rock. So this is where it all began for Mark Mangold, and it's a really very listenable album with some really good heavy proto prog on it. So there you go. I think I just about made it through. I imagine this video will be fairly heavily edited to try and make sense of it. Managed to get all the way through without coughing. I will be back hopefully a little bit sooner than previously to get another video out. But in the meantime, I'll be listening to lots of records, so I'll have more to talk about. Okay. Take care. Keep well. See you soon.